So, welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin Zodiac. Today, we have the amazing Ms. Kylie Morgan, who is an intuitive astrologer. In her everyday job life, she runs a small virtual assisting and digital marketing business. And yes, she used astrology to co create and navigate her fulfilling, aligned, and thriving career path. For 4.5 years now, she has been utilizing astrology in her own life and assisting many others, including myself, with navigating many aspects of their personal life through an astrological lens. She is currently working on an ABC guide to understanding and utilizing the foundational knowledge of astrology. So stay tuned for that because that's going to be coming out with the Bitcoin Zodiac. Kylie, we're so excited to have you here.
Hey, I'm so excited to be
Welcome.
here. Hello, hello. Yes, we have so much to get into, so much to share, and I'm just so excited to be here and to dump whatever I can of knowledge of astrology to anyone and everyone. I myself am a continuous student of it, and I love to just teach and continue to learn it. So I'm so happy for everybody who's excited about learning astrology, everyone who's here to do that. And Corinne and Claire, you guys are incredible. You guys are definitely in good hands with this podcast. So
Thank
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
yes, thank you.
Well, let's start off with maybe sharing a little bit about your even personal experience in astrology and how you got into that, and now with personal astrology and
Yeah.
the power that you've seen come through that.
Yes. So it was probably about 5 years ago for me that I had the best way I can sum it up is like a remembering about astrology and reading the stars and using that to have more self-awareness and to co-create with, right? So I always say it to you guys that I really see astrology as like an energetic blueprint and like a map. And for me, when I had that remembering, it was the most like I've never in my life felt so seen and so understood,
Mhm.
before. And so that feeling is something that really sparked me to want to do what I do and to be passionate about it and to always continue to learn it myself and apply it, with my own personal life. So yes, it's been about 4.5 years. I started that way and I started to just dive into others' charts. And it has just been an incredible journey of remembering astrology as a true ancient language. And that is what I'm super excited to teach and share with others because it is very, very empowering. It is very powerful if you're trying to be a deliberate co-creator of your reality. When you can foundationally understand the language of the stars and co-create with energy and understand the language of energy, right? Which is this universal language that all of life creation flows with, in some way there's these observational, synced, powerful patterns, right? And so this is why I do this. This is why I love this. I love to teach this to people. And you can put on so many different lenses in astrology. You can do personal, medical, relational, financial, everything that is creation speaks this energetic language, everything that has been created and minted into reality, right? So I hope
Absolutely.
that kind of answers what you
Yeah.
asked.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does. And so for people that are brand new to astrology, they maybe know their sun sign. Where
Mhm.
next? Like what's the next phase? Because there's so many beautiful layers to astrology to uncover and to sort of dig into. Where do you think that they should go next?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this actually ties in perfect with the ABC to astrology guide. And so there are definitely foundational pieces of the language that you want to get down.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, your sun sign. This is what's very common and trending in our, sphere of knowledge with astrology. However, there are several other planets and powerful positions in the map of the sky that is worth looking into. So I would say starting with the main, learning about the planets in general, right? Understanding what they are: sun, moon, Venus, Mercury, Mars, right? We've got some others, but I would say hang out with those five personal ones. And there's also a strong position, two strong positions in the chart that are worth looking into. It's called your ascendant and your north node. And so just gave you 7 pieces there if you need to pause and rewind and write them down, because
Yeah.
Google Chat GPT is full of information with just those terms. But, foundationally, we want to have these building blocks of understanding the planets. We want to understand the houses. You probably hear that a lot. And then we want to understand the aspects as well and the modalities. Okay, so there are 4 foundational building blocks: planets, aspects, houses, modalities, um, that you want to grasp, just knowing what those even mean, what those are. Okay, because it's just like learning a language, right? You're learning how to say, I am, my name is, these are foundational. You're learning foundational questions that you can ask to communicate and to broaden your scope of awareness, right? So those 4 building blocks of astrology are going to allow you to start to use this language more fluently. And along the way, as you learn about what these things are, you're naturally going to go, well, what's mine? So you're going to go, oh, Mercury's the planet that, refers to how we communicate. It might be correlated with the words I speak, I say, I think, right? Then you're going to go and find out, well, what's my Mercury? My Mercury's in Cancer. What does that mean? Okay. Just follow the thread. Just follow the thread of questions that come up, and you will find that um, just applying it personally as you learn
Yeah.
unlocks a lot of awareness for you. So don't be scared.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I've even found it through my journey when I first started, when you just start piecing the pieces together, you're like, oh wow, like what you said earlier, I love, like it's like, oh, I finally feel seen and understood. And if anything, it gives you such a deeper understanding of yourself, or like a clarity that you're like, oh yeah, it just pieces the dots so perfectly
Yeah.
together.
It is. It's like connecting the dots. And I truly, truly
Yeah.
believe, right? Astrology is an ancient, ancient language. And it is something that is inherent. It is intuitive to us as humans to look up and use the stars. I
Yeah.
mean, the fact that you even might get a little bit like, revved up about the fact that someone said your sun sign is in Aries. Maybe it pisses you off. Maybe you're excited about it. I don't know. But there's something in you that feels innately like, what is that? You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so I just think deeply in us, in our experience, in our human experience, right? Because energy is not created or destroyed. And so deeply in our DNA, we understand that the stars are a map. We've used them for thousands of years. And this is why I just want to encourage, Claire, it might seem a little wacky, the answer I gave for everyone. I know some people listening might be like, what do I do with that? Well, I will say I'm a digger. I'm a researcher. So that answer to me sounded fun and exciting. I know that's not for everybody, but I want to encourage you to not be afraid of it, right? To not think that it's so overwhelming in this big mountain that you can't even begin, just
Mhm.
start somewhere, let the dots connect, as Corinne said, and you might find that it's a lot more natural to you than you thought it would have been, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there's also like a level of acceptance, like when you start to join these dots. Like I think for me, when I like first learn about North and South Node, like this is such an eye-opening thing for me. Like my South Node's in Capricorn, my North Node's in Cancer, so it's like, oh, that's why I'm like that. And so there's a little more compassion for yourself and a little more understanding And with that, I don't know, you can just flow a little more freely rather than trying to be like, why am I like this? I've got to stop this. I've got to change this. It's more a channeling of that
Yeah.
energy and understanding. So I love, love, love that about astrology. I thought that was the perfect answer to that
Yeah.
for sure.
And I love that you brought that example up because so many people are going to find that they have these little, like, tidbits of information about specific points. Like you might find that relation when you read about what your moon sign is, right? You might
Mhm.
find that relation when you learn about what your Saturn sign is. That's a really powerful one to understand the challenges and the things that you've been asked to develop and work on in your life, right? When you start to read that, you go, that's why it's been feeling so tough. And but I can do this, and then you start to learn about your Chiron placement, for example. That one really hit home for me. That's our
Yeah.
deepest energetic wound, right? It's what feels so soft and sensitive to touch. And it is very apparent in our lives all the way back from childhood. And so, yeah, there are so many little points that you're going to read and you're going to go, wow. But that's why I say also adding that second layer in whenever you're ready, meaning really understanding those building blocks, planets, aspects, modalities, houses. I even want to simplify it for you and say, just start with understanding first and foremost, what are planets and houses and aspects?
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
because when you just understand that those are foundational building blocks of this language, you're going to start to have those little moments of like, oh, my North Node is in Leo and it means this. And wow, I've connected so much to that. What house is it in? Because now you
Mhm.
understand what the houses mean, right? So then you go
Yeah.
North Node in Leo in the 11th house. Wow, that's another layer of like, oh my gosh. And it
Yeah.
just gets more and more accurate the more you layer these building blocks on. Does that make sense? It
100%.
tells a moving story. Your chart does.
Yeah.
So,
And so how can like somebody use then, after they've gone and learned these, how can they use astrology to help maybe receive guidance in their life and like even as you've done with your businesses, like co-create with
yeah.
the astrology?
Yeah. So again, when you're learning this like a language, and I want to reinforce that, a whole lot. Because when you are learning this like a language, you understand that it is not a written in concrete stone thing that you're learning here. You're learning a language, which means that you're learning how to broaden your scope of awareness and communication. And that allows you to be a more deliberate co-creator, right? So always keep that in mind when you're approaching astrology, that this is not a set in stone predictive tool in that way. It's not a crystal ball that's going to tell your future, and it should never be utilized like that. That is a misuse of your energy and
Love.
disrespectful to the language. Okay. It
Yeah.
is a language to communicate with the stars and to use it to co-create. So to Corinne's point, right, when you're learning it from that approach in the first place, it's going to open a whole lot for you to be able to then be a co-creator with, right? So now, how do you do that? Well, it's going to come naturally because you're going to have questions about life and what you want and where you want to go and what's frustrating and what's going on. You know how many times I get the question text to me from my family, what the F is happening in the stars right now? Because my
Yeah.
life is in shambles. And then I'm like, great question. Let me teach you how to read this for yourself, right? This is what we're talking about. So this is how you do it.
I
It's
love
just
it.
having a conversation with with your highest guide, we'll call it, aside from God. But I see astrology as the universal energetic language of God, like as though the
Mm.
stars are God's fingers, if we want to say that, right? And
Yes.
whatever being, whatever source connects for you, I believe it is our source's language. It is woven in the patterns of the stars, the way it speaks, right? So I just think it's taking counsel with it in some ways and, allowing yourself to ask these questions and have this conversation back. And so, another practical way of doing that, right? I wanted to work on my work career life. And I didn't want to feel so frustrated, particularly with my everyday work life. So where would I start as an astrologer? trying to align energy that works more for me with the blueprint that I was born with, right? I'm going to go look at my birth chart, and I'm going to look at my, in other words, energetic blueprint. And I'm going to see where I can work with myself. And there's infinite possibilities of the way that energy can be minted into reality, right? I'll give you an example of this. Every single one of us could probably look at another human, no matter how vastly different we are as humans in physical creation, and we'll go, that's a human. I mean, that's kind of hard to argue with. Humans in general have a human quality that is like pretty, like it's pretty apparent that like that's a human, right? But isn't there a million and one different ways humans can look? I mean, don't you see humans still to this day that blow your mind of like, you didn't even know that humans bodies could do that, or that we could be created like that, or, you know, whether it's from actual way that we're born or from taking on life and the way that things happen throughout time in our bodies. It's like there's infinite ways that we can physically show up and look as humans, right? This is energy. It's creation. There is a consistent pattern and weaving of creation, right? But it can look infinitely different even in these patterns. Is this making sense? I'm trying to kind of, okay. So I say that
taking notes.
yeah,
I just had
okay.
an idea. I was like, bing, I need to write this down.
Yes. And this is where I say that to say that, like, you know, so for me and for anybody, you can pull up your super, super unique blueprint, okay, of energy, and you can co-create it with it in vast and infinite different ways. And you can be an aware co-creator by knowing your energy in this way, right? So I would go to my birth chart and I'd say I want a more aligned, happier flowing everyday work life. Okay, let's go see what's going on in your sixth house, Kylie. So now remember, you guys, you learn the houses, you learn the building blocks, you know what this means. So now you know where to look about what does that mean? Where's my sixth house? Now you know. And then you look into your sixth house and you have planets and you have symbols all on it, right? Now it doesn't just look like a messy circle with a bunch of symbols and lines. Now you know that those symbols are planets, and you know what those planets' characters speak to. You know what kind of energy they bring to the table, right? So this is what happens. Then you have a conversation with yourself in your sixth house, right? For me, I was aware of the fact that my sixth house is ruled by Cancer. I have a very moody everyday work life, honey. I need space and time to feel into it. Sometimes I want to work at a coffee shop. Sometimes I want to work at home. A lot of times I want to be alone and I want to work at home and I don't want to be micromanaged, right? These are big things for me. And my Cancer sixth house speaks to this. I also need to be able to take it slow and flow with my day. I need to be able to have more control of the flow for me, right? So I was able to really start to channel my energy intuitively into options and ideas and ideate on things that would feel more aligned for me in this way. And then you start to use other things, like I have Mercury in my sixth house and I have the sun with Mercury in my sixth house. So it really gives a lot of a boost of energy of my life force being in relation with this ability to assist and help create systems for people and communicate well and you know, come up with ideas and analyze data. So I was looking into this and I'm like, how can I do those kinds of tasks at home? Well, virtual assisting was something for me. So I thought, oh, I never thought to try that, but okay, maybe how would I maybe be a virtual assistant? What kind of skills do I already have that are everyday work skills that I can work with, right? And this was all a very natural conversation for me because I was using my birth chart. So to even ask myself, what everyday skills do you have? I have a Mercury and Leo in the sixth house. I got a lot of everyday skills that are useful. Okay, maybe not everybody feels as, you know, strong in one department, but you have something that will speak to yours. And this is why you need to know how to speak the language, right? So I was able to have this natural flowing conversation with myself using this blueprint. And that is how I found a natural flowing path that really found me because I was just working with my energy. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
And everybody can do that. And it's going to look different for each and every one of you.
Yeah. Amazing. a question that I get asked a lot as well, and I find different astrologers have sort of different interpretations of this. But how do you interpret houses that are empty, that don't have any planets?
Yeah, I love this. First and foremost, that does not mean that you don't have anything going on in that area of your life. That is not okay. So a lot of people freak out when they come to me. I have nothing in my seventh house. Will I never get married and have no relationship ever? Do I just not have relationships? No, no, no. That does not mean what that means. And I love to settle that for people because that is a scary thought when you don't know what you're looking at and you get overwhelmed and think I don't have
Well, I
anything.
mean, some people do interpret that way, and like
They
where
get
it's like they have
worried.
an empty house, they're like, am I never going to have a career? Like, is there no
Yeah.
work for me? Like, those kind of things. Some people do interpret it like that. So
Yeah,
I
and
don't
and so
either.
I love this question just for anybody out there who has ever thought that. It's a normal reaction that I see where people have immediate worry and it's nothing to be worried about, I promise. So again, when you're learning the language, right, you'll start to come across these houses and you might see that you have no planets and no symbols going on in your house. And so there's something called, first and foremost, that house is still a real theme area in your life. And it's still the one I'm going to look at when you ask me a question about, for example, career. If that 10th house is empty, as an astrologer, I'm still looking at your 10th house to talk about this story. Okay. So it's still telling you things. There's an energy that rules that house. If anybody has a visual of a birth chart in their mind right now, or if you've not yet ever looked at yours, I'm sure these wonderful ladies probably have resources they can point you to for how to get a free birth chart pulled up online. There's a lot of them, even just Googling free birth chart can work. I think AstroSeek is the one that I used to pull up all the time, but
Yeah.
get your birth chart pulled up. You look at it, you see what looks like a pizza. And it's cut into 12 slices and it has a crust, okay, around it as well. And that crust is what I'm talking about here. So when you are in the back in that 10th house and it's empty, I want you to look at your crust and see what sign is ruling this area of your house, okay? Let's say, for example, it's Sagittarius. Now, going back to our slices, okay, I want you to see 12 slices getting cut across a pizza right now. Where that slice mark happens is where you see your line in the houses, right? So imagine that slice mark is what is known as our we're going to just call it the start of the house, but the ruler is the sign that is on the slice, okay? That's important to say because you're going to see all those cut into 12 slices and you got your crust that's got all the zodiacs around it. The sign that is on the slice is the sign that you want to pay attention to. And moving in the direction clockwise of 1 to 12, right? The sign that is on your starting slice. And so from there, you have a connect the dots happening now and you have more to the story. And so say it's Sagittarius, that's on your 10th house ruler. You're going to go look for Sagittarius's planetary ruler, which is Jupiter. Okay. And then Jupiter, wherever Jupiter's hanging out in your chart, is going to have a direct connect the dots to your 10th house themes. So if Jupiter's in your 8th house, you very likely would have a legacy, a passion, a calling, an authority. This is 10th house, a longer term public awareness career, right? Like, sorry, that's not the right way to say that. The way that your legacy would show up, the way that your public image of what you do for real as your career and work would show up, right? Which is different from your 6th house, which might be just more of your everyday work life jobs, okay? But let's say that you have Jupiter ruling your 10th house and you've got, or Sagittarius ruling your 10th house and you've got Jupiter in the 8th. The way as an astrologer I would put that together is, oh, this legacy or this career path might have something to do with a very taboo topic. Okay. You might dive into more of like divination using astrology. You might dive into type in psychology type work, right? You might actually be really into investigative work and solving crimes. You know what I mean? And you actually might find that you're quite good at this. Or that you're just a really deep researcher and you can really dig under all the bullshit and find the truth, or that you're a powerhouse in powerful partnerships and mergers. Maybe you directly work with mergers and acquisitions. Maybe you know, work with other people's resources somehow, right? So this is all eighth house stuff. And because your Jupiter is there, it's going to tell a story with your 10th house. And I hope that that totally showed people how that works. So even if your stuff is empty, it's not really empty at all.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's so cool, because that is a really, really common question. So I
And I
remember.
mean, I do want to add, sorry, on that point,
Yeah.
before we totally get off it, it is still important though to recognize where there is a bunch of stuff happening in your chart, right?
Mhm.
So just as much as if a house is empty, it's still telling a story, but those busy houses are concentrated and they're telling a very concentrated story. They're
Mm,
telling a more main theme storyline, right? In terms of just like how much of the other areas of your life are even connected to this area. Because
Mm,
if so many planets are hanging out in one house or one few houses, right? Then so many other areas of your life and those rulers are in that house. So they're connected to that area of your life. Does that make sense? I just wanted to not totally lose it there, Claire, because that's also important for, you know,
yeah.
versus having none or having a lot in one house. So
Yeah, it's sort of like that. If there's a lot in one house, it's like that theme will affect many areas of your life.
yep.
Right? Is that what you're sort of
Bingo, yep. They have
communicating?
those planets are rulers of different houses. So they
Yeah.
have those connect the dots with them of like
Yeah.
if you have, you know, Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Venus all in one house, then
Mm,
going back to our pizza crust, wherever Leo, Sun, Cancer, Moon, Gemini, Mercury, Virgo, Mercury,
right.
uh, Taurus, Venus, Libra, Venus,
Mm,
wherever all those signs are hanging out, are all drawing connect the dots to that area.
so interesting. So like to flip that, my initial question on its head, like you, or the example that you were giving, when people are like, oh my God, I've got nothing in my seventh house. In the
Mhm.
other way around, it's like if you have a lot of action happening in your seventh house, then most likely a lot of the areas of your life are going to be connected to relationships, and you know,
Yes.
those are the through
Mhm.
lines, those are the threads there. So yeah,
Absolutely.
so
Mhm.
so interesting, so exciting.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. It really is. It's a moving picture when you look at your birth chart and can really read that language.
and
Yeah.
seeing as, because I know this is a common question, I know even before I even understood astrology at all, this was
Mhm.
definitely something I used to Google.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I said this, but while we're talking about the seventh house, okay, a lot of people are like, I'm a Cancer, right? So I need to find a guy who is X a sign, and they're going
Yeah.
to be the love of my life.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm a Cancer sun, or because I'm an Aquarius sun, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Can you give us, or give our audience a little bit on that? Like, how do we
Absolutely.
find the love of our lives through astrology? What should we be looking
Yeah,
out
oh, that's a good
for?
question. Okay, you guys are going to either love me or hate me for this answer, but I love when people come to me with relationship questions because it is always so like, yeah, help me find my one perfect match, soulmate, love. And they think that the seventh house will maybe, because they learn that that means relationships, will
Right.
maybe, you know, scream everything about that, right?
Yeah.
First and foremost, relationship, that word in astrology is going to get so broadened for you when you start to really see through the lens of what Venus in the seventh house really is. And secondly, there is, you know, imagine each human being as a mini universe. Okay. There are so many individuals and things that are creations of life that you will and can fall in love with, and have harmony with, and have beauty with, and have different stories with, that are all so unique. Because when every single person interacts with each other, they create what's called a synastry chart, and it creates a relationship with your planets talking to each other, and everybody's their own mini universe. Everyone's interaction with you is so unique, and it's its own little story. Okay, so even the relationships that haven't worked out have still spoken to you in your energy somehow, and have either stirred up some old wounds, have stirred up some areas in which maybe your Venus is aspected not very well, and it's showing you where that feeling of harmony and relationship felt weak for you, right? There's so many things that are happening with relationship and with the lens of astrology and what we can learn about ourselves with it, when we get out of that mindset of just thinking that it's going to show us this one perfect soulmate person. Okay, I've used to be a subscriber to that, and astrology has expanded my knowledge of myself and has allowed me to unsubscribe willingly with that, right? And so, however, now that's where you could just, I got to set the tone there, right, when it comes to relationship. But we'll dive in a little bit of how can we though find the energy that feels more harmonious for us naturally, right? So your sun sign is really just speaking to how you give your energy. It's the I am life force of you. It's the ego of you. It's how you show up and give your energy, just like how the sun gives us energy and life force, right? It is what is probably going to be most maybe like apparent in your expression to others. Maybe not even to yourself so much, but to others, right? However, when we're looking at relational harmony, we want to feel nurtured and cared for and attractive and harmonious with our person. So we want to learn more about our moon sign, more about our Venus sign, in order to actually find some more harmony around those themes. Also, in the seventh house, whenever you're trying to align with more of that energy, you'll want to pay attention to the ruler, right? Just like we talked about before with the 10th house. So whatever's on the crust of the 7th house is going to tell a big story about your relational themes in general. And if somebody's planets, such as their Venus, Moon, Jupiter, let's throw another, even Sun can feel good, or ascendant. If those types of things in other people are in the same energy as what's in your 7th house, then it's going to feel more aligned with relationships in your life, right? So, for example, if someone has Cancer in the 7th house, or you said they're a Cancer sun, so let's play around. If someone has a Cancer sun, but they have a moon in Taurus and their 7th house is ruled by Aries. Okay. This individual is actually, for other individuals who have Aries placements, that's going to light up this individual's 7th house. They might find that they attract a lot of Aries. They might find that they might even find that sometimes it's like a love-hate thing, where it's like, you remind me of me a little bit, but also show me the opposite side of the coin of me. You know what I mean? And then you also have, like, if you have a moon in Taurus, then people who have Taurus moon, Taurus Venus, Taurus Jupiter is going to be by your moon. So it's going to feel good and nurturing and more harmonious. Is this making sense? So like, as you learn the language and you understand like the moon and Venus and how to read the 7th house, it'll just allow you to maybe more intentionally work with others who harbor those energies as well, so that it can feel like a more aligned relationship environment for you. Yeah.
There's lots of homework for us right now. I'm like here, like getting up my chart. I'm like, okay, let me check my 7th house. Let me check Alex's 7th house.
But again, like it doesn't mean, because people might go, well, I have my 7,000 Aries and I don't know any Aries. Okay, well, it doesn't mean that that's how that has to be minted into reality, right? But it still is something like, for example, then your seventh house is in Aries. I mean, you might be very, like a strong entrepreneurial personality who is really into like loving that other people are doing their thing, right? Like you love that
Mhm.
other people are doing their thing. You love you get inspired by other people paving new paths. You love a pioneer of ideas, right? Maybe someone comes along who's an Aquarius, but they are so harmonious for you because you love that energy of pioneering ideas and being bold and being yourself. And so you really resonate with that. Does that make sense? So it's like, but also remembering that every single individual that you're with in your life is doing this story, this universal dance with you. And whether they're stirring up wounds, whether they're showing you what you actually don't value, whether they're, showing you what subconscious patterns you're still holding on to, or whether they're helping you work through some tough things that actually have been tough with this person, but like I'm growing as a person, right? That's that relationship with people who have your North Node. They will do that to you. Go hang out with people who have your North Node. They're going to encourage you to get out of your comfort zone and recognize the areas where maybe you haven't, where you've got to work on that, but it's something that kind of draws you, like you feel good about it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So this is where I just want to remind everybody, like, don't turn to these things and automatically dismiss every person and everything in your life.
Yeah.
Astrology is not a way to go and say, okay, I'm going to check my charts and decide exactly how my life's going to go today. No,
Yeah.
you do not have influence over the stars and the energy that they bring. You have co-creative, synced flow with it, right? Like whether you're aware of it or not, just the way that the moon pulls the tides of the ocean. It's these
Right.
energies are pulling on you in your system. And so when you're aware of that flow and you're moving with it and you're open to life and you're willing to let things come in and your experience and you're willing to look at astrology with a curiosity, I think
Yeah.
you'll get the most out of it for sure.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
often describe it as a surrender to the season that we're
Mhm.
in, that kind of thing. Like rather than, I think we can sometimes approach astrology from a desire to control. We just do that because we want to feel safe.
Yeah.
And it's very natural. It's like, oh, well, if I can just figure out like what the perfect person would be for me, then
Right.
I can, eliminate all of these other people that maybe will hurt me or whatever, or it won't work out with or waste my time or those sorts of things. Whereas it's just not really like that when you're working with humans and human energy, right? It's not it's not a tick box. It's like, okay, check.
Right.
Aries, check, it's not like that. It's much more of an energy exchange. And I just wanted to read, like earlier when you were talking about the language of the heavens, a language of God, really, like how you were saying how the stars are like the fingertips of God. It just so reminded me of one of my most like favorite biblical scriptures, and how you're talking about how like it's such an ancient practice, an ancient language. And so I just like wanted to bring that into the conversation because I think that you just kind of like described it really beautifully. And so it's like Psalm 19:1, and it says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. And I mean, that just gives me chills
Yeah.
um, every time I read that. Especially as the Christians don't love astrology generally. Corinne and I are both raised Christian as well. But it's just so there. Like this has been a communication between God and humanity since the beginning of time, before there ever was a Bible or a Torah or a Quran or, you know, or Jesus or any prophets or anything like that, the heavens have been communicating with God and humanity. And I just think it's so beautiful.
And I'll just quickly add to that because I do want to hear your thoughts, Kylie, on that.
Okay.
Literally this morning, I was reading the Bible as I do every morning, and I was reading in the I'm still in the Old Testament. I've been really studying it. And it was Moses creating the calendar. And
Mhm.
every new month started with a new moon. And
Yeah.
every new moon, they would do certain sacrifices to God to start the new month. And it was created as like a Sabbath day.
Yep.
And everything that they used to work through, even just with their calendar, it would be with the moon. So I
And
love
the,
reading that this morning.
almanac works with the moon still, which is very much teaching you about gardening and the
Yeah.
seasons of life for like practical living. And yes, that is so beautiful. I have a couple other scriptures that aren't coming exactly to mind right now, but there are several just to say that
Mm.
point out the language of the stars in the Bible. And I love that you brought that into this conversation because I think it is a juicy bit of information to remind a lot of people who are seeking to learn and understand God through the Bible. And
Right.
there are books in the Bible that have been removed over time. And one of them was the Book of Enoch. And the Book of Enoch spoke all about this, about
Yeah.
astrology. And I truly believe that the language of the stars was intentionally removed from the masses because when you
Yeah.
withhold wisdom, you hold power.
Yeah.
And when you hold power, you get people to pay you for that in your
Right.
energy, in your money, in all sorts of ways. I'm not just talking monetary payment. I'm talking they will enslave your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I am very passionate about this topic in particular and dance on it lightly, but they'll say gracefully is what I try to stay on with it, right? Because I don't mean
Mm.
to step on anybody's toes with this topic, but I do think that
Oh,
it is important to remember. And so there was the Book of Enoch. That's worth looking into. It has a lot more scripture about that.
yeah.
There's also scriptures that are just in the current testaments still about the stars. And I mean, when we think about even how Jesus came to be with the story
Right.
of was it the three
The three
disciples,
wise men.
three
Yeah.
wise men that found
And
him?
kings. Yeah.
Well, they followed the stars, honey.
Literally.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
followed the
Imagine.
stars as a literal map to go
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
Yeah.
this chosen one that they used the story of the stars even telling them that the day had come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just very powerful information. And I am so passionate about helping people remember the way that I remembered. Um, and I feel like there was something else that came to mind in that, which I think, I don't know if, I don't even know why this is still in my heart, but I'm going to share it because it pivots back to the relationship stuff. But I feel like maybe somebody wants to hear this, but it is important on that note as well to remember to use astrology. I think, Claire, you were talking about using it, how we often go in a control way, and that's such a good
Mm.
conversation to bring up. But, you know, when we're approaching it with this openness to be curious about our life and ourself, right? Then you're
Mhm.
able to, even in relationship, approach that area of your life as rather than how can I use this to control things so I don't get hurt,
Yeah.
look at how can I learn about why I'm hurting? How can
Right.
I learn about what is triggering my pain? How can I
Right.
learn about what is deeply rooted in this pain so I can heal? That
Mm.
should be the conversation. Not how can I avoid anything that triggers it, right?
Yeah.
You're missing out on a lot for your life when you do that. And
Yeah.
so, even in relationship astrology, as an astrologer who loves to talk about healing, I encourage people to look at their wound, their
Mm.
Chiron, to look at, you know, where their maybe Venus is aspected with some hard aspects that are teaching them some lessons about relationship, right? Like these are important parts of the conversation. I just felt so I got full body chills. So somebody's gonna hear that and you guys should comment
Yeah.
if it resonated. But I just feel so pulled to remind people of that when you're approaching this language, don't cut yourself short from the beauty of it by being afraid to dive deeper into yourself. And you'll do that if you try to use it to control everything outside of you. This is a language to
Yeah.
teach you about you, which is where the power of everything outside of you really is born from. So
Mm,
that's
yeah.
all my horse
And the
on that.
flip side of that as well, because I mean, the questions, I don't know if this is your experience as well as an astrologer, but anytime I get any questions surrounding astrology, it's love and money. It's always love and money.
Yeah.
How can we get more of both? Those are always the priorities, because I think that those are sort of things that maybe people feel are out of control in their lives. And again, it's the sort of same thing when you look at career, abundance, all of those sorts of things in your chart. A lot of people approach it, astrology is like, how do I get more money? How do I get lucky? How am I doing this? And again, the orchestrating sort of side of things, whereas you can really allow your chart to speak to you about the areas that, again, that are more wounding, that are maybe blocking that flow of abundance. Those that are, those experiences that have created those limiting beliefs that are like blocking you off from new experiences. So I loved how you described that. I think that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And thank you for adding to that. I love that word orchestrating. That's a beautiful word for that. And I think, to be fair, this is why, just as like I believe in the power of self-healing, but I also believe in the power that Corinne can probably laugh at me as she knows how hard this has been. I mean, laugh in a beautiful, loving way, because she would never do that to me. But as she knows how hard this has been for me of finding a therapist, even, and working with a therapist consistently. And so I want to use this example to say that, like, right, I use my own wisdom to work with myself powerfully and know about myself. And I am very, very potent self-healer. And so much so that I have been worked in healing works with others as well confidently. But I still think it's so powerful that I consult a therapist as well, right? And so there's really power in both of this. And on that note, with orchestrating, I felt like I want to say, as you go to learn this language of astrology and self-awareness and recognize the power in it and keep going and be a student of it, right? And apply it for yourself. And you should have your own vision and your own mind with it. It still is very powerful to consult somebody at times. And that's where I think the difference is between being an astrologer versus just knowing about astrology, right? Is that word orchestrating. Because I'm speaking this now more to anybody who's looking to consult an astrologer, but really also to the astrologers, people who think they want to be astrologers out there. You have a duty with people's awareness in that regard. Like, you don't, like, you need to be careful, first of all, about just consulting anybody, right? Even with
Yes.
therapists, right? You wouldn't go to a therapist who's going to say, oh, well, and reinforce all your bad habits and say that that's actually good for you and that maybe you should just go self-sabotage and there's nothing you can do to help yourself, right? Like, so you want to make sure you have the same like self, like, protection and respect in that way of when you're going forward to consult an astrologer as well. And astrologers need to recognize their duty in this way as just as a doctor or a therapist, not to say that those are comparable necessarily, but
Yeah.
as someone who's a holder of higher wisdom, you
Yeah.
need to recognize your duty in this. In that when somebody is asking those questions, Claire, right? Like, I get those a lot, the love and money questions. As an astrologer, what this tells me is just where this person's self-awareness is at.
Yeah.
And it's not to judge anybody, it's to meet them there. So I recognize that, okay, their self-awareness is here. It's still in a very like materialistic approach. They're still probably feeling quite tugged on and reactive to life rather than really a deliberate co-creator of it. But they're curious and they want to be, and they're wondering how they can, rein this in more, but they're still seeing from this vision. So that's telling me where they're at in their awareness, right? I know as an astrologer that love and money are connected to Venus, and they're connected
Yeah.
to self-worth and your
Yeah.
value and where you're spending your energy and if you have energy leaks. And so anybody who comes to me to talk about love and money thinks they're just going to talk about love and money. But I realize we're going to talk about what might be wounded around these areas, right?
Yeah.
And that's that orchestrating part. And it's also
You
important.
don't get any first timers that are coming going, hey, tell me about Chiron. I really want to know about my wounded heel.
I didn't even know it was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why, and then
Yeah.
I start to teach them from their starting with, I meet them where they're at. And
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
lead to these connect the dots, right? And then their awareness, you watch it bloom, you watch their lights come on. And this is why I love being an astrologer. I both think it is powerful to teach people how to read this language for themselves. And in every session, I try to leave people with more wisdom for that. But I think it's equally important that we have astrologers who recognize their duty and responsibility with higher wisdom like this and help people to turn their lights on so that they can be, self-sustaining in this way. But yeah, just to your point, I think anyone who's asking those questions, you're just showing me where your level of awareness is at. And we're all, every humans across the border and all sorts of different levels of awareness in different areas of our life. So it's no judgment, it's no thing. It's just something that every astrologer should check in with you and should start there and should orchestrate the conversation to help you connect the dots deeper for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm going to slightly pivot there, but so connected to what you're talking about, because I really see a rise of even just awareness around astrology, or even just hey, what about astrology? And more people even getting more interested in, hey, maybe I could get myself an astrologer, or maybe I want to start looking at this stuff for myself. And I feel like that's very related to now that we're in the Aquarian age. And we were chatting, and I know we've spoken plenty of times, all of us in different scenarios, about even Pluto in Aquarius and this big transition that we're seeing in the world, for every single one of us. So how have you been feeling, visualizing, or seeing even people shift, or even the world in general and society shift during this time? And maybe what can people start to notice?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yay. So exciting to be getting on Pluto and Aquarius, because this was definitely a foundational, massive shift, especially for those of us in the United States as well, because Pluto is a slow mover. And so it takes about 250 plus years to come all the way around back to where it was. So it will go through all 12 signs, very slowly over that course of time. And so anytime we have Pluto shifting out of a sign, it is like a big foundational, deep rooted shift. Okay. Maybe not one that you feel so quickly and suddenly, but you really feel building over time. So for the past couple years, we've been feeling into this theme of Pluto and Aquarius, right? But in January, we officially had our shift into it. And what I have been really feeling into and seeing with this energy is Pluto equals power. It equals transformation. And I'm talking again, foundational, permanent, lasting changes and transformation, right? And when we have Pluto moving from Capricorn into Aquarius, that brings the energy of shifting power dynamics from maybe more structured, traditional, even like brick and mortar business. We've seen the difference in the changes in that over the past couple of years. I mean, Pluto will foundationally change things. So since 2008, right? When Pluto, I need to double check exactly when it entered into Capricorn, but I feel like it was around
2008.
that. Okay.
It was
My brain
2008.
was like year. But think about the foundational changes that have happened even to like brick and mortar business, and the way that we have become so digital and in the digital era of everything, and the way that even just the initial web in general has become more it started to be more apparent in like schools. And you guys remember this boom of stuff happening, it was so fast, right? But like we started to change traditional sectors and things like schools and things like our brick and mortar businesses and our bank systems and our all these things, they started to get more digital and transformed over these past decade plus. So now that we have Pluto into Aquarius, we have that change and transformation continuing with that digital, building on that digital foundation that has happened in these traditional sectors, and we have ourselves starting to reach for more evolutionary, revolutionary is a big word here for Pluto and Aquarius, right? We start to reach for these leading edge, or just Aquarius really speaks to more power to the people, even recognize the changes we're having in influencer era and celebrity and this kind of stuff, right? Because Aquarius is very much plays in that realm, and Pluto is bringing significant power and change, right? But I want to dial that in a little bit, right? Because there's a lot of themes going on. I mean, even war and revolutions around the world, and big structures changing with big government, traditional government structures changing, even in the way that the governments are in power in the world. Even, it's like very big foundational themes are happening. But let's dial it in a little bit, even with Bitcoin Zodiac, and talk about how these changes are happening foundationally with money and power of shared resources and money and things like this, right? So definitely we've seen the changes of currency from traditional to more digital and crypto coins. And this Pluto and Aquarius is just bringing more power to that energy. But it also is, like I said, a slow drip, deep, foundational, long-lasting, transformative change. And with Pluto comes death and rebirth. So it's messy. I mean, birth is beautiful, but it's messy. You know what I mean? And with birth of things comes death of things, and comes not fun time for some people, even talking, even with just currencies and money. I mean, these have been foundational, scary, maybe changes to some people, intimidating. It's messy. I mean, you guys can agree to that at first, right? Like it's all these themes that are happening with this era. And but it brings power to the space and tech sectors. It brings more foundational transformation. So I can only imagine the world of cryptocurrencies and just the foundational change in currency that's going to take place over the next decade with Pluto in it, right? And obviously, with following, when we talked about this a little bit earlier, we can already see how, like, when Pluto dipped into Aquarius in March, was it? We said, yeah, into June of 2023.
Yep.
We had a little sneak peek of this energy, is what we like to call that.
Yeah.
And I think, what was it, like a 40%?
45% as we shifted from Pluto and Capricorn to Pluto and Aquarius, but 45% in Bitcoin's growth.
Right. So, and then over the past year, it's like some number you were saying of like 30% of Americans, I think, have
40% of Americans, I spoke about this in our last New Moon Gemini episode, and it was like 40% of Americans now own crypto, and that figure is up 30% in the last year. So I thought that was really phenomenal as
they're
well.
correlating. I totally, I think right there, Pluto and Aquarius's effects as like in action right there, as we can see, especially because the US, to that statistic of 40% of Americans have bought into this, right? And 30% of that's the last year. The US in particular, if you pull up its birth chart, Pluto is moving from its second house, which is it's more like money, bank structures, the maybe more like tangible money and power and things like this, right, happening in this second house energy. And it's transitioning into that third house, that Gemini house, that digital house, that crypto, I mean, Bitcoin and what it is, and the blockchain and all that is so Gemini and Mercury energy. And this is a mercurial house, a Gemini house. And so literally the United States is having a transit of the planet of power into a revolutionary currency that is happening worldwide. We're feeling this effect, right?
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's having it transition from its house of that physical money into that digital wallet is kind of how I see it happening a little bit. And we
Yeah.
even, saw traditional, moving from Capricorn, we saw like traditional banks and things like this start to discuss adopting a USDC, US dollar coin.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes.
That's just another
CBDCs.
example of how this energy I think is but again, it's like these are all just like it is a slow drip right now. It's a slow drip. It's a what's gonna happen. Something's shaking up for sure. Something's getting shaken up for sure, right? Like we're in that energy and we've kind
Yeah.
of been hanging out in that for like 2 years. So it's definitely filling up a little bit more. It's been dripping
Yeah.
for a minute here.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine the next decade and the way that this energy will foundationally shift these
Mm.
Mm.
power dynamics.
Yeah, you have those elements as well of Aquarius, again, you said earlier, like Aquarius is very much power to the people. And that's really what's happening with Bitcoin as well, is that there's this transfer of control of your own finances into more power to the people than this like centralized control. So that's also very much on theme. I'm kind of on this because all today I've been writing this short course about and the chapter was about the history of money and like decentralization and network effects. And sometimes we forget about that stuff when you're in Bitcoin and, you're just going through your day to day, but it was like a real moment of like, oh yeah, this is why we're here. And it just felt very much that like Pluto and Aquarius, let's fuck shit up energy, but like for the good thing,
But
moving
like
into
with
the,
some powerful purpose to like move things forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
yes,
And
yeah.
even to your
Bring
point,
more
Victor,
power to the people.
yes, exactly. Power to the people. And that made me think too of another phrase, which was that Pluto and Aquarius is also very much like global connection, global and
Mm,
galactic. I'm sorry, but when the stuff that happened with the government talking about the galactic stuff and how the reports
yeah.
and all that stuff, that was a big
Yeah.
thing for people in history, right? But it was very Pluto and Aquarius. I mean, it's
So much. Yeah.
and it was literally, it might have happened actually. It might have happened during that March, June window. I don't know. During that
It
during
was
that little
around that time.
Yeah.
that was very,
Yeah.
so I'm saying
It
Pluto and
was.
Aquarius is very much global connection. Aquarius is the nervous system. Okay.
And
So
galactic.
it's the global nervous system, it's the global connection, it's the galactic
Wow.
connection. Aquarian energy is very, I mean, I'm an Aquarius rising and I literally show up as a strange individual who does astrology to people sometimes. So it's like it's very galactic, strange energy sometimes. And so I really think going back with Bitcoin on this, right? We see it how it's like power to the people, but we also can see how this currency is creating this global connection with currency.
Okay.
It's something that we're going to be able to just use anywhere. You don't have to do exchanges anymore type of stuff, right? Like
Mm,
it's gonna create less borders around the use of your currency globally. And this is a big theme that I think is going to be foundationally happening over the next 10 years, right? Where we're going to see that foundational change in the world where eventually
yeah.
everybody's going to get on board. And I also am thinking that what else popped into my head just there? The foundational change with the global connection. Oh, and also how Pluto and Aquarius's time frame that we discussed earlier in history, we can see how when Pluto was in
Mm,
Aquarius, it was the Industrial Revolution. And
good.
then you guys said before that it was the Renaissance.
Yeah.
Italian Renaissance period.
So Pluto and Aquarius, literally, that gives you a historical view of what that energy brings, what periods come with that, right? So we're moving into that like Renaissance Revolution part 3 of like our history, but really part like umpteenth of history.
Yeah.
And I
Wild.
think something like worth pointing out as well, I really kind of loved your illustration of like this birthing period, And it's new, it's exciting. We're birthing something fresh and new, but it is also scary. And there are birthing pains. Like, so it's like not to be caught up in that. Like, you've got to be able to see beyond the other side. Just like when a woman is giving birth, it's obviously painful, but they're able to push through that and see it through to the other side to birth their vision.
Yeah.
And there's a great deal of the unknown, isn't there? That just comes with that.
Yeah.
It's just a great deal of the unknown that comes with birthing something new. And Pluto, or Aquarius and Pisces energy hangs out there. I mean,
Mm.
it's so on the leading edge of the unknown. Aquarius is the leading edge of the unknown. Pisces is the unknown.
Right.
How do you feel the nation states are kind of going to be affected by this new energy? Because I totally agree with you. This like kind of like global connection, all of that kind of thing. And I already see it actually. People are much more dialed into their community, their like-minded smaller communities, and connected in that way rather than the nation state as a whole. And it sort of feels like the way that we do government, the way that we divide land, the way that we say you're American, you're Canadian, this is all becoming like quite irrelevant. And so I wonder what that feels like to you sort of moving forward. We won't hold you to it, of course, but like, what does that
No,
kind of
yeah,
look?
I think it speaks to the transition again from Pluto in Capricorn over
Yeah.
to Aquarius. When we make that connection back again, it really shows that storyline that you're painting of like how we had this foundational, Pluto and Capricorn would have brought that era of like more power and control with traditional government, right? More
Structure.
power and control with those traditional sectors. Um,
Mm.
and meaning government, banks, education, health, and health sectors, global health, or
Mhm.
the national health. You know, I think that this shift, Pluto and Aquarius, what I feel into it with that is that we're having great revolution in all those areas, all those traditional power areas that held the power before. It's getting shifted now and revolutionized. So yes, to your point, I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I do believe more community is a big word there as well. Aquarius is big with humanitarian and community efforts,
Mm.
being more connected as a community. And that brings up that question of like how important really are these boundaries anymore and these borders that we
Yeah.
used to have up. Capricorn is a big conversation about boundaries and borders. Aquarius wants to break them so that it can create more space for the greater good. And so
Mm.
I do feel that there's going to be foundational changes in the nation state that reflect that. What that will exactly look like, who knows? I mean, will it look like a complete and total transformation of the traditional government structure as we know it? Will it look like a revolution from the people? Will it look
Mhm.
like, because it probably will again look messy and destructive at first. And honestly, we've already been in it with the way that
Right.
even the United States has been, and the whole world has been questioning traditional leadership and structures, and it's really starting to amp up this spirit of revolution in the people. And what that will ultimately look like, who knows? But there's going to be change for sure. And I mean, I think also pay attention to how those changes echo throughout other sectors again, like banks. We already talked about the currencies and how that's switching,
Right.
but also education. Notice how a
Yeah.
bunch of people are wanting to uh, do more like communal living.
Yeah.
That's a
Yep.
really big thing here.
Yep.
And wanting to go build their own kind of like utopian areas. But I think we might see more of that as well. But I do just want to add into this conversation, if you're kind of trying to weave this energy throughout the next decade, follow the North Node. The North Node is
Mhm.
going to weave
Mhm.
the themes of each year and a half for you. And the
Yeah.
North Node is like right now we have North Node in Aries. And so that is in opposition to the South Node in Libra. And so this axis is really having us explore, themes around even how we do relationships and business, and in the way that maybe marriage and the general traditional structure of marriage is changing. It's having us explore new entrepreneurial paths and pioneering new paths as individuals and as entrepreneurs. It definitely, that might lead to more connectedness in the community, working with your community of entrepreneurs and individuals that are doing their own thing. So, I just think following the North Node will definitely help paint some like tinier themes throughout if you're trying to kind of like track the overall transformation of this. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I do want to respect your time here, but if it's okay, I have one more question, just kind of like to tie it back, and maybe you already started to answer it in that last kind of part. Like, so for us as individuals, and if we go and look at our personal astrology through these transformational changes that are occurring during this time with Pluto, as well as then like the North Node, what is it that we can go look at in our personal astrology so that maybe we can tackle this period of time in the best way possible?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. So what we were just speaking to with this conversation, we were looking at it from a lens of um more of like global astrology and a world astrology and world affairs and stuff, right? The collective astrology. And so we'll just, to help everybody follow along, right? You just take that lens off, put on a new lens. Now we're going to look at it through a personal birth chart, and we're still going to use that foundational understanding of Pluto, meaning that it's bringing profound change, and it might feel messy, and it might feel uncomfortable, and it might feel intense is a big word for Pluto, right? Wherever it's passing through. It might feel deep, deep rooted change, right? It might feel long and like a this drip of foundational change that's happening. Same sentiment, right, is what we were talking about from the collective lens, but now from a personal lens, you'll want to zoom in to, for example, it's going through your first house. That is going to have changes of, identity, and just like literally how you feel like your physical self is showing up in the world. You might feel like an identity crisis. You might feel like you're literally having a death and rebirth of who you want to be and where you're even going in direction in life. It might feel like energetically that you are just literally becoming a new person in terms of how you want to be seen, how you want to dress, how you want to behave, and your personality and all these things, right? And so I would say to anybody in that time, go with it, trust the change, allow the transformation, root in, and let yourself, understand that this might feel messy and tough, but allow yourself to embrace that quirkiness and go on the leading edge and go be different and be okay with that, because it'll bring really profound transformation and internal power to you to embrace that energy while it's moving through that area of your life, right? And then in the collective lens, who knows how that might turn out? It might be that you rode that wave and decided to embrace this new quirkiness or your differences, or put yourself out there and let yourself change and let yourself explore that leading edge that others are not on yet. And then you might find yourself being a leader of a group in some ways, or you created this whole community for yourself that's so aligned with who you want to be and how you've evolved, you know what I mean? So and that might lead to more, collective, with those collective themes, how we said, like some people are creating little utopians, and people are starting to have like less boundaries and borders around how they allow themselves to evolve and expand. And so I hope that kind of draws in, like when you're looking at it from a personal lens, you'll just put on that personal lens and still use that same understanding of Pluto, but apply it to your personal self and where it's at in your chart, and just trust that everything is connected. So your personal energy will echo with a billion others that creates a collective energy that is all connected. And same with the North Node, personally following the North Node through your chart and recognizing the area it's in might just look like saying, okay, this theme of my life is going to be asking me to explore some new uncomfortable, uncharted territory. But it'll be fun to develop it and lay some ground here, almost like imagine it like a kid going to school for the first time. I feel like the North Node's kind of very much that energy. So if you have North Node in the 8th house, you might go, wow, I'm feeling really lured to want to learn about taboo topics, but it kind of feels uncomfortable and strange, but I'm just going to do it, because that's what the energy is encouraging right now. So, and just trusting that flow and moving with the transits in your personal life is really beautiful. It allows you to move with a very inflow way, a co-creative way with the universe, right? So I hope that answers. I don't know if it entirely hit what you were looking for,
No,
but
absolutely. Absolutely. No, that was awesome. There's so many things. I'm like here literally with my birth chart being like, okay, let me look. So
I know we're about to
definitely,
I know we're going to wrap up and there's so much.
yes.
And I just want to say, like, for anybody who felt encouraged or who feels encouraged to want to stay connected or keep learning about this kind of stuff, as Corinne said, I am putting together a course for the foundational knowledge of astrology. So stay tuned for that kind of thing. But I also will be releasing and getting back into it with my social media presence and videos. And so, Miss Kylie Morgan Astrology is where you would find me. So just literally, if you saw this and you guys want to have conversations or you have questions, just hit me up. My DMs are open. You can comment on whatever, and I'd love to connect and answer more questions for anyone. So
Love it. We love it. We look forward to having you back again as well. To chat
Definitely.
more as these things unfold. We sort of see like the Bitcoin Zodiac. We think that like in 10 years time, we're going to look back and listen to these episodes and be like, wow, like how did this play out? So we love having you through these shifts that we're all collectively going through. So it's so fun. Thanks for joining us.
thank you. I'm so happy to be here anytime, seriously.
Thanks so much. Love you lots. Peace, love, and Bitcoin.
Bye.
Peace, love, and Bitcoin.